Let's begin with the NCERT lecture for today, and this focuses on water resources in India. In this lecture, we would focus on the surface and the groundwater resources, the water management, the development of watershed areas, and how rainwater harvesting is essential and useful. To begin with, if we focus on to the world resources, we say 71% of the area or the earth is water. But we also have heard a saying, water, water everywhere, nor a drop to drink. That means most of the water that surrounds us is not potable, or what we say drinkable. Most of the water is saline in nature, which is present in our oceans. So of these, only 3% of the total water which is available is fresh water. Now with this mere 3% of the water, we have so much of population to thrive on. Also, with so much population, we understand that the availability of fresh water varies. The region where we have lakes, rivers, underground water, definitely the proportion of fresh water is much higher in contrast to the regions which are landlocked nations and which need to be dependent on other nations. So, there has been constant disputes. Now these disputes can be within states of a nation, so we call those as interstate dispute. Kaveri river water dispute is one of such examples. Then we have disputes between international boundaries. Between India and Pakistan, we have the Indus Water Treaty and the disputes related to Indus Water. Now these disputes or the tensions are growing constantly between communities, between regions, between states, between nations, and all of these needs to be understood at a very important pace. So what we need to understand here is a very basic idea of how we basically focus on the concept of super dam, and this is where we have talked about one of the dams, and this lies in Tibet. Now if we talk about history, say that Tibet was occupied by China in 1950, and the major reason why China occupied Tibet was twofold. Firstly, the Sanpo river that flows through it, and the second was the Mekong river. The Mekong river and the Sanpo river, both of these are very significant. Now, Sanpo river is a river which flows through the region of Tibet, finally takes a U-shaped turn, a hairpin turn, and enters India through Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and finally drains into Bangladesh. Now this is one of the examples that we have understood about the super dam. Now this super dam, which is being planned in the region of Tibet close to India, would definitely create international water disputes in a country like India. And therefore we understand water has been one of the major issues of contention. Also it has been said that if there is going to be a next world war, probably it could be for water, and that's how we understand the importance of water. Water is a real scarcity, specifically when it comes to drinking water. When we focus on drinking water, the drinking water should be first of all potable. That means whatever water sources we are using should be very well defined. In a country like India, we say that world surface area in India is around 2.54%. When it comes to water resources of the world, we have just 4% of the water resources which have to feed 16% of the world population which is present in India. So with just 4% water resources of the world, we have 16% of the population of the world that needs to meet its day-to-day requirements, and therefore water is a very essential commodity. Management of water and proper utilization, minimizing the wastage and recycling becomes important. If we focus on to the total rain which comes in the region of India, we say the total water from rain that comes to India is around 4,000 cubic kilometers, of which the surface and replenishable groundwater is around 1,869 cubic kilometers, which is of this only 60% can be utilized for beneficial use. That means we are left with just 1,122 cubic kilometers of water. Now, with such a scarce or with such a meager amount of water resource that we have available, we need to understand how can we actually use water. So as we mentioned, this water can be broadly categorized into two segments: the fresh water or the surface water. The fresh water can be categorized as surface waters and groundwaters. To begin with, surface water. Now surface water is a water which flows onto the surface. So four major sections under which we cover surface waters. Those are rivers which flow onto the surface. The water gets collected into lakes, ponds or tanks. So these are the major surface water sources that we quote. Now if we focus on the country like India, India is a country which is bestowed with around 10,360 big and small rivers running across the nation, and each of these tributaries approximately 1.6 kilometers long. So definitely we have a huge expanse of rivers which is present. Based on the annual estimated water consumption, as we said, of the 1869 cubic kilometers, only 1122 cubic kilometers is a beneficial or water that can be utilized. Now each of the river that flows has its own catchment area. Catchment area, I can simply put, is the area which can be drained through that water resource. So let's assume this is a river that flows. Now with this river, this is the catchment of the river. Now this river has another tributary. Now this smaller tributary would have a smaller catchment. There would be another tributary which would have yet another catchment area. So this is the catchment area. Now each of the catchment area is important. Across India, we have the east flowing rivers and the west flowing rivers. Important to note, most of the India, we can say more than 3/4 of the India is basically drained by east flowing rivers, and only a few proportion of it is benefited by the west flowing rivers. Also, when there is high precipitation or rainfall, we have rivers like Ganga and Brahamaputra which have a significant proportion of the total surface water resources. We say 60% of the total surface water resources is being concentrated in the rivers like Ganga, Brahamaputra and Barak. Also, the southern regions, Godavari, Krishna, Brahamaputra are some of the major rivers to cite which have a significant proportion of water resource that can be held. The next that we understand is groundwater. Now groundwater is a water which is present under the bedrock, under the soil. Now this water is the groundwater. When the rain comes in, the rain seeps through the soil into the lower layers, and these, what we say, are aquifers, which we have understood in our previous lectures, and these are the regions where water actually gets collected. Now if we focus on the country of the size of India, we have around 432 cubic kilometers of groundwater resources which are present. Now of this groundwater resources, Ganga and Brahamaputra have a capability to replenish nearly 46% of the total groundwater resources. So of the total groundwater resources, 46% just with two of the major rivers, which is Ganga and Brahamaputra. Now groundwater utilization also varies. Most of the regions of northeast India and the regions of Deccan have a very high proportion of groundwater replenishment. If we talk about some of the states, for example Punjab, Haryana, we have the regions of Rajasthan, northern Rajasthan specifically, then regions of Tamil Nadu. These are the regions where groundwater recharge has been, or utilization has been, significantly high. Now why? The reason simply is the reason of green revolution. So in the north, Punjab, Haryana and northern Rajasthan, we have witnessed how under green revolution lots of tanks, wells have been created, and these tanks and wells have been the source of exploitation of groundwater. As a result, at present we have seen a lot of regions converting into grey zones and dark zones. Grey zones and dark zones are the regions where the groundwater now has started to the groundwater table has started to go down significantly, and even if there is a bore well pumping in, they would have to go to extreme depths in order to get a certain amount of water which is available. On the contrary to this, there are states which are like Chhattisgarh, the regions of Orissa, the parts of Kerala, which have extensively low groundwater utilization. Now, if it is Kerala, we can simply say the reason is a good west flowing rivers which are seen, and as a result a relatively less need for exploitation of groundwater resources. But there is another group of states like Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, parts of Madhya Pradesh which have moderate intensity of groundwater utilization which has been witnessed. Now, if we focus on to the major rivers in India, we have the list of the rivers here and the total replenishable utilization along with the levels of groundwater. Now, these all values are in cubic kilometers per year. So, if we can see, we have Ganga with the highest proportion of total replenishable utilization which is seen, and when it comes to the level of groundwater, a significantly high level of groundwater is seen with three of these, which are Kaveri, the regions of Chennai and South Tamil Nadu, Kutch and Saurashtra. So, these ground basins have a significantly higher level of groundwater. So, this is a table which has been obtained from Ministry of Water Resources, Government of India, and has been important. Now, as we can see, this categorization, this shows the major regions which are drained by different basins. So, the western regions are being marked in dark blue and the eastern regions are marked in light blue, as you can see. So, in the north we have an extremely big basin which is the Ganga basin. The region of northeast is predominantly the Brahamaputra basin, and the southern region is the Barak basin in northeast. Similarly, we have the Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, Pennar, Kaveri basin, which are all east flowing rivers. And then the west flowing rivers are the rivers south of Tapti and the smaller groups of rivers which drain onto the western side in the Arabian Sea. Then in the north we have the Narda, Tapti, Mahi, Sabarmati as the major rivers. Smaller ones include the Luni, and in the north we have the Indus basin. Now, these are the west flowing rivers. When we come on to the coastline, India has a significantly bigger coastline with lots of lakes, lots of lagoons around, and this have a significantly higher amount of surface water. With surface water, we have good amount of fishing, good amount of irrigation, crops like paddy crops, which is the rice crop, paddy means rice. So, paddy crop, which is the rice crop, can be grown across these coastal areas. And then we have coconut as one of the major plantations and the major agricultural crop in the coastal areas. Coming on next, we do understand how water is being utilized. So, across India or across the globe, we can say there are three major reasons because of which we utilize water. First is definitely agriculture. So, agriculture, one of the mainstays of economy in country like India, we have huge amount of water utilization specifically for irrigation purpose. Then we have industrial utilization of water, and definitely we are surviving because of water, so household utilization. So, these three, or what we say as domestic utilization. So, these three are the most broad classification of usage of water. Traditionally, since India is an agrarian country and an agricultural country, we have 2/3 of our population which depends on agriculture. Now, with agriculture, we have various priorities coming in, mainly for irrigation. So, facilities for irrigation, we have establishment of multi-purpose river valley projects which were called as temples of modern India by Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, all these are the effort in line to develop the agricultural potential in the country. Now, with this, we understand that the surface water and the groundwater utilization of water in India is important for agriculture. So, if we categorize the country based on the surface water utilization, we say 89% of the surface water goes for agricultural activities, around 9% for domestic use, and 2% for industrial use. That is the categorization of usage based on the surface water resources. Based on the groundwater resources, 92% of the total water goes for agriculture, 3% goes for domestic purpose, and 5% goes for industrial purpose. So, as you can see, more industrial water is being utilized from the groundwater resources, and both groundwater and surface water have a significant usage in the industrial sector. Coming on next is the water conservation and water harvesting. Now, what is water? Where is water primarily used? As we have seen, agriculture is one of the mainstays of Indian economy. Now, agriculture in India is highly monsoon dependent. When you would have monsoon, the agricultural would be good. But what about the lean period? The lean period means the period in which we do not have any significant rainfall. In those times, we need to conserve water. Now, this water can be stored in various forms. There could be kunds or talabs which could be created. There can be development of underground recharge system which can be done. Rainwater harvesting, conservation of rainwater is another good idea. But whatsoever the means which we will be discussing further, we need to understand that utilization of water is very essential mainly for agriculture, specifically for northwest India and Deccan area, where the spells are not frequently interval. We need to have a huge potential for conserving the water resources for future utilization. Now, even with the green revolution, we have seen that a lot of high yielding variety seeds and crops have been used. Now, these high yielding variety of crops require regular irrigation. Now, for regular irrigation, we need to have a constant supply of water, and how do we maintain that constant supply of water is a big question. As a result, most of the areas which were not that good for water intensive crops, for example, regions of Punjab and Haryana, where we have seen a huge development in water intensive crops, now people are slowly moving to the crops which require relatively less water, because when you have more water intensive crops, what would happen? You are depleting a lot of groundwater resources, despite the fact that that region does not have ample groundwater resources. We are exploiting groundwater for growing those crops, and these crops which are returning good yield ultimately are creating a burden to the livelihood of the people there. Also, when you are utilizing more of groundwater, it creates problems related to arsenic and fluoride contamination. How? If the groundwater levels are higher, it would create more dilution, and as a result, the contamination effect would be significantly lowered. With depletion of the groundwater, water becomes scarce, and therefore, contamination due to fluoride, contamination due to arsenic, so fluoride poisoning, arsenic poisoning, we can see are rising in these areas significantly. Also, regular moisture crops that are required should be significantly reduced in these areas. Now, coming on next is the issue of pollution, water quality. Definitely, we have so many rivers, so many freshwater resources, but anywhere you go across, you would be seeing huge tons of plastic waste, tin waste thrown into the water bodies, the water systems. As a result, the microorganisms, the chemicals from the industry, the industrial discharge, the sewage which goes into the water, all badly affect the quality of water. This creates toxicity levels in the water, which is ultimately harmful for the flora and the fauna of the region. Also, the river water is intensively used for the purpose of irrigation, for domestic purpose, household purpose, and as a result, this is going into the human system, the drinking system, and creates significant impact onto the human health. So, water quality, purity of water, removing any unwanted substances from the water, and checking that these foreign material is not polluting the water system becomes essential and important. So, prevention of water pollution is important. So, under this, the Central Pollution Control Board has been established, which functions with the state pollution control boards and its various tributaries, which monitors the quality of water across the various aquatic resources at nearly 500 plus stations across India. Now, As we know, rivers continue to be main source of water pollution across India. Most of the industrial discharge, sewerage discharge, agricultural waste is going to the river systems. We have certain stretches of rivers which are highly polluted. For example, Yamuna River between Delhi and Etawah. Similarly, we have the Sabarmati region in Ahmedabad, Gomti at the region of Lucknow, the Kali Kunnum stretches. Then we have Vegai near the regions of Madurai. Also, the Musi River system near the regions of Hyderabad are some of the areas which are highly polluted clusters. So, legislative provisions needs to be embarked. For example, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1947 has been released. Later on, we had the Environmental Protection Act 1986 and Water Cess Act has been important. So this is an extra cess which is charged on the normal taxation. So cess is any tax on tax. So let's say there is 100 rupees, on that we have 10% of tax and 1% of cess. So of this 10%, 1 rupee would be the amount which go as cess. So water cess has been taken into consideration for charges in order to preserve the water bodies, create public awareness, maintain that the water bodies are not polluted, and have a proper policy for its implementation. The next is the National Water Policy. Now, National Water Policy was laid down in 2002 with certain priority areas. The major priority areas was drinking water, followed by irrigation, hydropower, navigation, and industrial use. Now, irrigation and the multi-purpose projects have been very important along with the drinking water. Also, we need to have the limit for which the groundwater and the surface water should be regularly taken into account, improving the quality of water, making better utilization of water resources, creating more awareness among the people, and creating a consciousness for conserving the water resources, checking that there is no extra wastage of water, no extra leakage of water needs to be taken into account. With the rising demand and declining freshwater availability. So our demands have been constantly increasing with rising population, rising resources, rising usage, but our availability has been constantly declining. We need to manage the resources adequately. So managing the resources judicially is one of the only ways through which we can solve this problem of water scarcity. So good ways could be check that water which is available in the oceans, in the seas can be utilized. So desalinize the water which is present in the oceans. Definitely the cost is higher. India as of now do not have significant desalinization plants which could be at an effective cost. So conservation measures need to be adopted. Also, encouraging watershed development systems, making sure that water availability is there for constantly recycling and reusing the water. Reclaiming the wastewater is again important. So all these methods need to be incorporated. And let's say, take a simple example that the water which is used for washing the vehicles could be used for the purpose of gardening. So recycle and reuse of water becomes very important. So how judicially water can be used is again a very important way of managing the water resources. The next is watershed management. Now under watershed management, as we said, it is an efficient way of conserving the water resources, both the groundwater resources and the surface water resources. Now when I say conserving water resources, what do we mean? Extra runoff from the water resources should be prevented, leakage, percolation, recharge should be managed, and all natural resources should be judicially and optimally used. Now there have been various projects in line with the same. So the first major project that we focus on is the Haryana project. Now this Haryana project has been developed with the aim of the central government. The idea is to provide water resources in the rural areas mainly for drinking, irrigation, agriculture and forestry purpose. So those are the major works of this Haryali project started by the central government, and this is executed by the Gram Panchayat at the local level. The next is Niru Meru. Now Niru Meru is a project which is known as Water and You program. This Water and You program has been started by Andhra Pradesh government and has been running very successfully. The next is another interesting project which is Arvari Pani Sansad. Now this is a program started in Alwar by the Tarun Bharat Sangh, and this is under the Rajendra Singh, who is also known as the Waterman of India. He started this project in Alwar in Rajasthan. The idea was to create Johar or water conservation projects where water harvesting structures would be built. Similarly, in Tamil Nadu, we have a specific rule that no building construction would be allowed unless and until it has its own rainwater harvesting management systems. So those are some of the efforts in line of conserving the water, developing the water which can be utilized for future management. So now we have one of the case studies of Ralegan Siddhi. Now Ralegan Siddhi is a very small village in the region of Ahmednagar in Maharashtra. Under the leadership of Anna Hazare, this region has prospered significantly. So what happened in 1975, this was a village which was under extreme web of poverty, and liquor trade was one of the major things that used to happen through this path. So there was the transformation that came in by one of the retired army personals, and the idea was to take up voluntary planning, voluntary labor. So all of the villagers came together and ensured that we would have minimum dependence on the government resources, and we will develop our village in our own unique way. So the work of percolation tanks started to begin, and then later on there were people working together to develop the embankments of the water bodies they were creating, and as a result water storage structures were created. With the youth group that followed, which was Tarun Mandal, there was a constant development in the village, a constant awareness. All the grazing which was there in open was banned, and stall feeding was allowed. Crops which were very water intensive like sugar cane were banned, and less water intensive crops were grown in the region. Pulses, oil seeds were encouraged. Local body was participating highly into the activities, and as a result people even from the nearby villages started to move towards the vicinity of Ralegan Siddhi in order to establish their livelihood in these areas. So Ralegan Siddhi is definitely one of the classic examples where the village was turned into a marvel with lot of greenery because of the creation of water systems and embankment systems, and therefore this has been one of the simple examples of watershed management that could be probably a interesting way of development in the nearby areas as well. The next is water harvesting. Now rainwater harvesting is essential. When we say that India is a land of monsoon, we believe that monsoon, which is highly erratic in nature, uncertain in nature, we need to conserve that amount of water which we are obtaining in the monsoon period. Usually what happens is across India, interconnection of rivers is not there. So as a result, the extra water, either it goes in the form of flood, it drains out or wipes away the fertile top layer of the soil, which is neither beneficial for anyone. So with this rainwater harvesting, artificial kunds or tankis or tanks, what we say, could be created, and this is probably low in cost. This is much more eco-friendly because simple effort which could be done by the people and the community itself. Also, when you have rainwater harvesting, the dependence on the groundwater would reduce because you are creating the tanks from which water would be used throughout the year, and as a result the groundwater levels would not go down, and there would be dilution of the contaminants. So the poisoning related to arsenic, contamination related to fluoride, could be significantly low. In India, we have seen eastern parts of India, mainly the regions of Bihar and Bengal, have been suffering worsening consequences of arsenic contamination. However, the western parts in the regions of Rajasthan have been suffering because of fluoride contamination. Also, with this, we can bridge the demand-supply gap because we now have water availability throughout the year, which can be significantly utilized. The community dependence decreases because each of the household now have a capability to have rainwater harvested for themselves, which can be utilized for the lean months and the lean period. The issue of desalinization of water, which we have been always stating, to utilize the ocean waters, desalinize the ocean water and utilize it, which is a high cost and high establishment rate work, can be significantly reduced, and even the water from the surplus states can be transferred through water deficit states through interlinking. That has been one of the major ideas, because as we say, let's say the parts of Ganga and Brahamaputra are the areas where you have lots and lots of water. On the other hand, the states of Rajasthan is a state where you have a significantly less number of rivers. If the small rivers here are basically interlinked with the major rivers, this could create a flow channel of the water, and the water scarcity in these regions can be significantly lowered, and the water surplus, which is seen in the areas of Ganga, Brahamaputra, where flooding is one of the common issues, can be curbed. So droughts on one side and floods on one side can be controlled by interlinking of rivers. This has been one of the projects that has been in line since long, but still execution and development is on way. So rainwater harvesting, river interlinking are some of the major ways through which water resources can be judicially and efficiently managed. This was about water resources in India. In a quick glimpse, we would be covering many more interesting topics in geography based on NCERTs. So stay tuned for updates from our side. Have a wonderful day ahead.